Just to give a brief background, let me just fire my screen showing up. So my name's Pete Draper. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Makuta Visual Effects. We are going to be talking about, say, the VFX of Pushpa the Rise, and a lot of it was actually what we call invisible effects. So it wasn't kind of like your over the top sort of like the guy gets punched and then goes into orbit or anything like that kind of thing. But it was more along the lines of sort of invisible ones in the way that for cleanup stuff, there's a lot of cleanup work. I'll come to that shortly. And also because of logistical issues of shooting during the pandemic and limitations of obviously crew on set and so on and so on, there was a lot of additional visual effects which actually went outside the original scope of the work that we were originally brought on to do. So just to give you a little bit of history, so I'm, let's say my name's Pete. I've been CEO and co-founder of Makuta. I've been running for, hang on, I have to do the maths now. I think it's coming up to about 13 years now. We've been running 12 years, 13 years, 12 years, 12 years, 12 years, 12 years. That's it. I've been here 13 years. Company's been running for 12. That's it. Yeah. So it's been one of those days. Can't even count now. So yeah, we've been running for this amount of time. We've obviously done stuff for Eager, for Barbary, for that thing will be on my tombstone. And also recently Triple R, which I can't show you because it's not out yet. It's just so annoying. It's one of those things. But fun fact, the things that we did in Triple R actually kind of also work its way within Pushpa and vice versa as well. So the two actually had a synergy, if you like, with regards to techniques and methods. So the same artists that were working on Triple R were also working on Pushpa as well. So caused a couple of headaches, a couple of clashes at delivery time, but the technologies that we implemented actually got utilized on both platforms. So that was really kind of interesting. I do have a reel to show. I'm actually going to skip it. Two reasons. Number one is time. I've only got half an hour and I can talk for a long time, as you can possibly work that out. And the second thing is, just in case I run out of duration, I'll show it at the end. So let's get through that. So the first thing we primarily do when we actually come on board is to actually discuss with the client about what's actually necessary, what is required for each and every single scene. So what things that we can anticipate, what things are problematic elements that are going to be there on shoot. What's basically one of three things: what's regarding cost, what's regarding safety, and what's regarding practicality. So case in point, there was a sequence which I'll come to mostly later on, which involved, again, those people who have not seen this film, apologies, spoilers. So sorry about that. So if you don't want to hear about that, put your fingers in your ears. I'm terribly sorry, because I'm going to be going through a fair amount of that. Is this a sequence where he basically gets kidnapped and there's a bag over his head. So him, you know, the hero running around with a bag over his head and not being able to see is kind of not safe. So working out the logistics of how you actually physically shoot that, what you're actually going to be doing on set, what's going to work with regards to the fight, what's going to work with regards to shooting with the crew, what's going to work with regards to the fight master and the art direction and what the director actually wants. So that, and then figuring out the process prior to us actually going to shoot, is a lot of the process. It's called pre-production. So not just for this particular episode, but for multiple episodes also. So you go as far as you can, obviously, with regards to pre-prep. You try and find as much information out from the director, from the producer, from the art director, and from the assistant directors who are working with the show to ascertain exactly the actual amount of scope that one tends to have. And you get an idea of the kind of amount that you do. So what we've got here, for example, on this screen, we've actually got how we do what's called data acquisition. So data acquisition is basically logging every single thing that happens on set. So you've got a screenshot of the actual shot. You've got the bottom left, you've got the structure of the application that we've built, which basically tabulates everything and collates everything. And on the left-hand side, you've got the resulting log sheet. And this is done for every single take. Okay, so you can see On the left-hand side, you've got multiple pages. That's multiple takes that have been done. So you've got notes and media, which is collated and built together for every single piece of thing, every single thing that's captured, whether or not it's a reference, whether or not it's an actual master take, a blue screen take, a separate plate that you're shooting at another date, and so on. So all this is logged down. So when we get back to the studio, everything can nicely and neatly put together. So it's going through and you're literally collating every single piece of information. Not only are you actually logging all the camera information, you're logging things down, for example, like time of day, weather conditions, GPS location. So you know exactly where you were, when you were, and where you shot the thing. So if you need to go back and rebuild the thing, you can do that. It's not just a case of just going and photographing cameras and stuff and locations, but you're also going back and you're going and collating things like, for example, elements which are adjacent to that particular area. Case in point, in this particular film, everything's about, you know, forestry. Everything is basically about wood and the surrounding topography. So it's hiring drones and going out and data scanning and LiDAR scanning and doing a lot of photogrammetry and image references and collating a lot of, you know, terabytes of data of foliage and structures and land masses, so that they can be, if necessary, recreated back at the studio, just in case that we need to refill and to repopulate elements in the background later on. Case in point is if there's a lot of cleanup work, you need to make sure that you have a lot of plates so that you can patch that work back in and clean things up later on. So we're collating things like flowers, we're collating things like woodwork, foliage, and so on and so on and so on. Right, can everybody see that? Right, I ain't gonna touch anything until I finish on this one. Right, okay. So back to what I was saying. Distribution assets. So basically, we're collating everything together. We're not only just taking photographs, we're taking basically going through and scanning elements, like, for example, props. We're scanning things like environments. We're going through and generating all digital elements of anything which will actually be able to recreate actually digitally, that's not going to be safe for the artists to handle. Case in point, in a lot of shots we needed to replicate and duplicate many of these logs. Case in point, in the waterfall episode, when they're dumping all of the logs into the river, they flow down the waterfall and all that kind of stuff. So we had to generate a lot of elements for those sorts of shots. So we're also going through, and we're also what's called LiDAR scanning, which is in essence going through and laser scanning the entire space and determining, okay, where every single element is, where every single piece of contrast is, where every piece of geography is relative to where the camera is. This helps in twofold. Firstly, is basically it allows us to ascertain where set extensions need to be. So in case in point, in this particular one, this is the climax. This is the climax set that was built on a floor at Ramoji Film City and then handled by a third-party vendor, which I think it was NAC, if I remember correctly. They went through and took the geometry that we generated and used that for camera tracking, so we know exactly where certain things are. So you don't need to put things like tracking markers in shots like this, because you're using the geography of the actual set so that you know exactly XYZ where you are, because you know where that particular piece of geography is located and therefore where your camera's located. We're also going through, like I say, scanning not only logs and stuff like that, we're going through all the vehicles. So every single vehicle that was obviously utilized within the show, we went through and scanned that, primarily because we had a fair amount of dynamic camera moves going on, and in some cases, some digital crashes that we needed to create, because on the spot, it wasn't practical or safe for the actor to jump out of a moving vehicle or smash into a well, or in some cases have the lorry come out of the well also. So a lot of the fluid work and a lot of the additional elements, the additional logs, needed to be replicated and placed into these shots so that they were more safe for the artist and for the crew to deal with. So we go through, we scan not only the logs, we scan the lorry also, take reference photographs of everything within neutral lighting so that we can then recreate the entire structure to scale exactly, because we know exactly where everything is because we've scanned the thing, and we can recreate the entire asset verbatim. So when we're going through and we're recreating all the shading work, so we're shooting everything with polarized lighting, so therefore all the textures have been shot without any kind of reflections going on there, so we can recreate the entire thing faithfully. So when you come to actually placing the thing and labeling it, whacking it into the actual shot, everything tracks in exactly. So the prop that the artist is interacting with is basically just a cross section of the actual vehicle that he's getting out of, grabbing hold of, and jumping out of. So art department recreated a section of it, not only to cut light, because lighting is obviously very, very important when you're trying to dynamically mix CG and live together. It has to match, otherwise it just comes weird. And gives him something to interact with, puts his body weight onto, and then he can jump out of the way. We're also recreating a lot of foliage. Again, like I mentioned, a lot of this kind of stuff, the technologies that we implemented for creation and distribution were used hand in hand between RRR and also for Pushpa as well. What we created in Pushpa could translate across to RRR, and what we created in RRR also translates across to Pushpa also. So lots of forestry works in both particular films. I can go as much as saying that because some things have been visible in the trailer. So all of these particular elements, again, this was totally different from what we were actually utilizing in the other features, because this is bespoke for these particular environments. So these references that we shot earlier on, we recreated those and created distribution systems in Blender using geometry nodes to create all of these individual foliage elements, the actual growth system. So we could actually not just have 4 trees here, for example, we could have 4,000 trees, different permutations, different variations of each and every single one. So each and every single tree could be uniquely different if necessary, but still have some instanced elements, which should be memory heavy. Case in point, the leaves. All the leaves were basically instanced in essence for base level stuff, and then same deal with the textures. We had a pool of X number of textures that we'd utilize, and then a system which would create a slight randomization for not only orientation, it would fake an orientation using vector math and UV offset to create an aesthetic of a displacement when it actually geometry was actually totally flat. So you get these kind of variations and hints on highlights like this, for example, when the actual leaf was totally flat, but the actual shading work was creating like a slight offset and a slight rotation. It's very kind of handy. And we used it a lot in other films, like to create like window variations. Instead of having everything's totally flat, it creates like a slight offset just to kind of break up a pattern. We used it in that, we used it in this, and it's very kind of nice to try and add that randomization and add that variation within every single element that you're doing, because nothing's perfect. Case in point, in these logs, we worked on a fair few of these log shots, ones that worked anyway. And again, even though we only had a certain number of logs that we actually utilized, we had to still have thousands of these things incorporated within the shot. So again, you're creating variations based on shaders, you're creating variations based on scale, and even to a point of actually building a system to kit bash together multiple elements of logs to create new ones. So trying to remove that repetition of, you can suddenly see, even for a brief fraction of a second, to try and remove any of those kind of like repetitive elements. Lots of elements obviously were composited together, case in point in shots like these, when we're trying to incorporate, you know, elements of logs traveling over waterfalls and so on. Now, one of the principal issues that we had with this is, even though we actually later on constructed and made hundreds and hundreds of these prop logs that we used in another location, we actually didn't have those here. We only had like 50. So for a shot like this, it wasn't sufficient for us to be able to throw all of these practical logs down the waterfall. So they ended up actually having to be digital. There was quite a fair few of these shots that actually needed to have a lot of digital logs actually added and make the water a little bit more exaggerated and blend all these things together. And obviously, because you can only go so far with scanning, you're either going to be replicating or recreating the entire of the waterfall. In some cases, we ended up doing that. and in other shots, we actually tried to incorporate it basically just by basic luma keying. And in a lot of cases it worked, and some cases it didn't work. And it was mostly down to the fact that we were getting the edit very kind of late. So some cases we got edits through, which were very, very early on, and then everything got changed, and then everything just got delivered to us at the last minute. So we're then trying to scramble to make sure everything gets through and gets done on time. So lots and lots of stuff to do with these, for example, these dam shots. Some of them were compromises, and some of them were like actually trying to make the shot a little bit more dynamic by adjusting the camera moves, by obviously negotiating with the DP to make sure that we are obviously getting that kind of dynamicism to showcase the trepidation of like, oh, are they going to make this thing in time? In some cases also, we actually had to recreate the entire structure purely because of an artistic decision. I mean, this dam itself was deemed to be actually too wide for this particular location. So therefore, we had to rebuild and recreate using the same foliage generation that we had previously, a structure on the left-hand side to rebuild all of that land mass, and even to a point of recreating the water as well. So we could obviously have those logs going down it, and also purely down to the fact that the location earlier on was like a more of a choppier water and also flowing in one particular direction, as opposed to the actual dam location, which was everything was stationary because the dam was actually closed. Ours was open, so there should be a flow going through, which is obviously bringing all the logs down, but in the actual live play, everything's stationary. So therefore we're having to recreate all that lot as well. Case in point here, we had to recreate all of this. Like again, the dam was never open. A lot of this was basically from materials that we'd either had in our pool or we recreated through simulation. So part of this is part sim, part of it is stock that we basically shot in other dam locations that we managed to acquire. We managed to go to dams and persuade them to open the gates and shoot that, and then close the gates so we can showcase plates of when this is actually closing off and it's cutting the water. So all of the water would then just cut off just before the logs arrived at the actual location itself. We had some other waterfall shots as well. One that you possibly didn't realize was actually digital. This was actually shot in another location entirely, but we actually ended up utilizing backgrounds from our archive. And this background is actually from a photograph reference that we actually shot during Barbary 1. So this is actually a background from Barbary 1, which is actually down at the Erythropali Falls down in Kerala. And the waterfall, I believe, is also from a different location. So the waterfall is from one location, the rock face is from another location, the water in the background behind the guy with the umbrella is another location, and then the foreground is Hyderabad. So all that is basically assembled just for this one particular shot in this song. We're also scanning small elements as well. This Jeep is not really a small element, but it was actually required for us to actually ascertain the position of the camera. So when we're doing any background plate shoots, we know the angles of the camera that we need to achieve. So in some cases, we're starting close, we're moving around, and then we're going tight in. So we're knowing exactly where we need to shoot these actual background plates. It's just to make sure that we didn't have to go through and recreate more 3D trees unnecessarily for some of these particular sequences. So we did two sets of Jeeps. One was basically for the background Jeep, and one was for the foreground one in which the hero was sitting. Case in point, this particular sequence when he's just about to get kidnapped. So we know where we need to swing around, so we can work out through tracking what the angles are going to be, so that when we go through and we shoot the backgrounds on a later date on the actual primary location, what the camera work needs to be, so we can reverse engineer exactly what we're actually going to be shooting and in what particular angle we need to do and what timing that needs to be as well. So this is obviously the feed through into the aforementioned kidnap scene, where we actually ended up having to cut holes in the hero's shirt that was put over his head so that he could see. So he's running around the trees and then gets kidnapped and fights all these other guys. And then we end up just having to work with, again, third-party vendors who actually went through and they repainted all of those holes that we cut and rebuilt the entire front structure of the cloth so that it looked like he was completely covered for that entire duration. So that majority, about 80–90% of those shots were digitally manipulated in some way, shape or form by one of the third-party vendors who also worked on the show. The show itself actually had around 1,800 visual effects shots in it. So it wasn't just a case of these particular ones, these primary ones, which I've been mentioning, but it's also a lot of cleanup work which has been done, rig removals, light placements, wire removals and so on, removal of crew, removal of debris that didn't make that place look remote enough. Possibly you could see a house in the background, that kind of stuff. So lots of these villages and lots of these structures to make sure that this place did look very, very, very remote. This snake also, the snake was a bit of not necessarily a throwaway, but it was actually one which was required, and it was told to us it was necessary because the character is very, very in tune with nature. So originally we actually had this particular one. This never made it into the film. This particular shot never made it into the film. There was actually 3 shots of this particular snake going across, and because of editorial decision it basically ended up getting cut. But the director liked the snake asset and the snake animation so much, he ended up actually replacing it and sticking it back into another shot, which was used where the snake actually goes over a rock, this guy, which actually was then utilized within, I think, his name card on the trailer, on the trailer itself. So this thing was actually added in very, very kind of last minute. I think we turned around the shot in just a few days because we already had the asset from working on it for these particular shots. We actually then reanimated it, lit it. We didn't have any scanning information as to the rock itself or anything like that. So our tracking team pulled a decent job out of this thing. We managed to get this the snake in place, and in and out, I think it was like around about a couple of days or something. That was it. We then actually shift to Hyderabad. We'd already shot everything pretty much on location where this entire story is based, or near thereabouts anyway. But then due to COVID and due to restrictions and logistical problems, we ended up actually relocating a large portion of the episode, of this waterfall episode, to actually shooting in Hyderabad itself. So initially blocked out the entire structure, so we know exactly where everything's going to go. And then again, same deal as before, we scan it. As soon as we go to floor, we LiDAR scan this entire thing. This is basically a point cloud. This is a point cloud which ascertains and generates the geometry that you've seen earlier in some of the shots, like for example, for the trucks or the Jeeps, that is then surfaced. It's just, this is a nicer presentation. It showcases exactly how much detail goes into all of this lot. So you're capturing trees, you're capturing the structures, you're capturing anything up to around about 300 meters away from the actual scanning point. So all these black dots that you're seeing here, they're the scanning points that we actually went through. So we spent like a good day going through and scanning every single aspect of this space where the cameras would be placed. So what you're going to see beyond there, what you're going to see this way, what you're going to see that way. So therefore, again, when we know when we're going to be placing our film cameras, we can recreate those things, because all of that background needs to be replaced. The entire background was visible in Hyderabad. There was no trees. There was nothing really that was forgiving in any way. So everything had to be recreated for pretty much every single angle that you saw within those environments for that particular episode and a couple of other episodes as well. So we had a fair chunk of work, not only to do a lot of cleanup, like for example, removing all the piping for the emission points of all the water, but also in a lot of cases replace the water itself because it wasn't fast enough. It wasn't fast flowing enough and it wasn't taking the logs. And also a case of the turbulence wasn't there. So a lot of that stuff did end up getting replaced. And also the connecting rocks, because obviously reflections, we ended up taking scans of these structures and then recreating those and then rebuilding all of that lot around there as well. And not only that, but obviously naturally the entire background as well. So this gives you an idea of the type of scope of the stuff that was actually done for this particular one. So the actual main live section is only this bit. So this is pretty much for most of the entire episode. So when we're actually flying over this thing at the beginning and also in one of the other subsequent shots, you can see exactly the amount of kind of distribution work that needs to be done, the amount of volume of foliage that needs to be recreated, and also the setups for the background. So the only small amount was actually utilized, which was just the live Jeep going through, and also the structure of the background as well. I'm just going to skip through this particular shot because it's a little bit lengthy. Doink, doink, doink. Are we moving forward? No, we're moving forward. So it gives you an idea of the sheer volume of all of these particular types of shots that we're doing. Again, a lot of foliage work. None of it was actually 2D plates that was done, apart from the mountains in the background, which were shot from our references, which we took from the actual location at the same time of day. So we went back there, worked out the light orientation, the geography, and shot the backgrounds and layered those in so that everything, light direction, everything matched for the same time of day, and matched the foreground to the background and so on, and vice versa. So again, same deal. I had to replace all of the water purely down to the fact that there simply wasn't enough turbulence. So part of it was fluid simulation. Part of it was from from layers that we'd shot. Conveniently, there was actually flooding around that time when we were actually shooting. So we actually went and shot a lot of turbulent water stock purely just out of coincidence. It actually worked out in our favor quite well. Volumes of logs, again, it wasn't safe for the hero to get covered by so many logs. So we ended up, again, creating a lot of digital ones, doing a lot of rigid RBD simulations to get additional logs to interact with him and to interact with the environment and to create those splashes, etc., on areas of the water, which obviously was being replaced anyway. I'm just going to skip forward a fair bit because I know I'm running a little bit on the late side. So again, this entire episode itself was, every single shot, background was replaced completely. So much of work went into this, like months of work, just to get these backgrounds all closed off. I'm just going to skip forward. Can I skip forward? Yeah, we've got this lengthy shot at the end. Okay. So yeah, that was that. And then obviously, like I said, the last thing was this snake deleted shot as well, which I've already mentioned. And I think that's about it. There was, again, like I said, there was an absolute metric ton of additional cleanup shots, which were handled by multiple vendors. Ones which, off the top of my head, were basically, so there was ours. We did a fair amount of them as well. There was Thunder Studios in Hyderabad. There was NAC in Chennai. There was Deccan Dreams, and also VFX Pirates as well, also handled on this lot. And now, guys, primarily Ajay, who was our on-set soup, handled and distributed all that work out from the editorial directly to these guys, and maintained obviously the QC and maintained the pipeline for work coming back to us, and also going to DI, and obviously for the director's approval and for DP approval as well. So yeah, that's about it, guys. Thanks very much. Any questions at all?
Yeah, thanks, Pete, for showing us through. Pushpa is indeed
apologies again, sorry, just apologies for I don't know why it cut out twice. My Mac just went, I'm gonna have a sleep, and just decided to reboot itself for some bizarre reason. So
that keeps happening.
I think it's a good excuse for me to buy a new computer.
That's so. There are two quick questions I would like you to answer.
Yeah.
One is from Delphin Ava. The question is, what software did you use while creating the foliage assets?
It was Blender.
Okay.
Yeah.
So another question is from Mr. Behram Patel. He has asked, did Makuta create the wave shot in RRR? If yes, how that was done?
The what, sorry?
The wave shot.
The wave shot, yeah.
The wave shot.
In RRR. There is a, I think he's talking about the trailer. If you watch the trailer, there's a wave shot.
Hang on a minute. I have it here. Hold on a momento. Let me just what he's referring to, because we in that trailer we did around, I think it's around about a good 70% of the work in that particular trailer. I am just stopping my screen share before I end up getting myself into trouble. Right, hang on a sec. You know how far into the trailer it is? The wave trailer. So the wait, what? The wait. What does he mean by wave one? Is in the all of the?
No, there's a wave.
Yeah.
You know how water waves?
Yeah,
How
I've got an idea what water waves look. I'm just trying to. I've seen this trailer so many times. I'm like, I cannot recall a wave in this trailer. I'm looking at it now. I can't see it.
Okay, let me just share the screen with you and show it to you then. Yeah, the water, the wave in the beginning.
Hold your
It comes
horses.
at 17 seconds. Mr.
Comes at
Patel.
17 seconds in.
Yeah.
13, 15, 16, 17. Just you're sharing it.
I'm just trying. I'm just thinking whether.
If you can you share it?
Let me. I presume he's talking about it at the beginning. 1 second. I presume he's talking about it right at the beginning.
Oh, that. Oh, this is the. Oh, you mean the first teaser that was done?
Yes.
Oh, that. No. That shot I think is stock. I think that's stock. That's stock.
Stop.
Oh yeah. So the one where he goes bush like that and he's standing there kind of thing. No, that was I think we were knee deep in shots, and that again I think
This one.
I think that's if I remember correctly, I think that's a stock background, and they comped him on. But no, that wasn't us. I think that was someone that they just I don't even know if this is in the film, to be honest. I'm not even sure if it's in the film or if it was just shot for trailer. A lot of these sorts of shots, when they're doing these sorts of teasers, a lot of it was done in the trailer. In that particular sequence, I think the only thing I did personally, I think this was 2020. This came out November 2020, I think it was. I do remember doing a section of it from home, and I do remember it being November. I did the fluid sim. I worked with I did some work with Firefly. They did all the animation and the rendering for it and the comp work, but I did the when the spear spins to camera and the water's kind of coming off the spear. So I did that here, literally like in this other room, and then sent it across to those guys as an Alembic file. They then rendered the thing, comped it, and then made it look pretty. Because I just gave them like a grayscale cache file. I went, right, render that. That was it. So yeah, that was like 2-3 days on that. That was it.
Yeah. So 1 minute. Give me a second. There's some other questions to Pete, and we actually have to get on. But how much prep work went into this film? Would it have been easier to do that shoot using virtual production rather than piling it onto you and the other VFX?
Yes, but the primary thing is what they wanted to do is obviously be faithful to the location. They actually had, we did actually discuss it. It was actually discussed early on in the pre-production phase. Now we actually came on after a bunch of work had already been shot by another VFX supervisor. So all of the waterfall elements, the dam stuff had already been kind of shot, and then everything got paused for COVID, and then he wasn't available, so we came on board. And so I think that discussion, that decision of actually going out there and shooting live was already made. They'd already spoken to the relevant authorities. They'd already finalized the locations. There were limitations as to locations when we could actually shoot there. Like we could only shoot during the day. We were never allowed to shoot at night. So that opening sequence of the film, when there's a big car chase, they're chasing him in the van with all the apples in the back and the logs are inside the apple lorry. That was all day for night. And then another studio, I think it was Mantrix in Hyderabad through us, went and added in all of the light beams and everything. So that entire thing was a conversion job that they handled very well. So it was all very faithful, if you like, of trying to actually be faithful to the actual location. So even if you did recreate this entire thing in Unreal, you still have to do a fair amount of pre-prep work and build the entire location up, because they wanted to showcase these locations. They wanted to showcase that snaking roadway going down the side of the hill. And you know, it's a beautiful location, and so rightly so they wanted to do it. If, you know, my goal at the end of the day, and what I always say to every director and every producer, if you can get it in camera, get it in camera. Simple as that. It's going to look better. At the end of the day, it's going to look better. If you have the ability to shoot the thing, shoot the thing. VFX, as I mentioned before, should be used for one of three reasons. It's not practical, it's too expensive, or it's not safe. You know, it's not safe or practical to shoot in space, unless what I hear is correct, that Tom Cruise is going to do it, in which case, money. That's the third thing. So at the end of the day, if it's not practical to go and do this, then fine. Virtual production is awesome for that. If it's not safe to do it, to actually build a structure like, for example, a King's Palace, which is like 2 kilometers high, fine, you know, do it digitally. But always try and get as much in camera as possible. And I always say one simple thing: treat it like it's 1950. VFX doesn't exist. How do you get this in camera? How do you shoot this? How do you achieve your vision in camera? And then visual effects comes around and basically achieves the stuff that you can't get in camera. It's not physically possible for you to be able to achieve.
Okay.
It's not there to fix your problems. There are still lots of films which basically do that, though, which my personal opinion is a silly way of doing it. Of you know, I love what I do, don't get me wrong, but it does at times make people lazy. Oh, post will fix that, VFX will fix that. We don't need to clean that up. We'll go for another take. Post will fix it.
Okay, all right. No, I've got messages in the chat saying that we need to wrap Peter up.
Oh, sorry.
No, not a problem. You can answer
Fine. I'm not wanted.
One last question.
Fine.
Do you hire interns for any disciplines?
Sorry?
Do you hire interns?
Do we hire interns?
And keep it short.
We've generally, as a rule, no. Generally, as a rule, no. And there's a reason for that. If you're going to work for us, if you're going to be working on commercial work, then, you know, you deserve to be paid.
No, interns are paid too. Interns are paid. Interns can be paid also.
Then they're employees.
No, they're interns.
Trainees. Let's call them trainees.
Okay.
So trainees we've had, and then we've put them on payroll.
So interns come in.
We do have some at the moment. So we do do it. But we vet everybody just like we would vet somebody who's actually applying for a job. So it's not just a case of like, I might have an idea in doing this. Well, it's like, well, if you don't have an idea about doing it, if you don't have a clear picture about what you want to do, and you're just using us as a test bed, there's a wealth of information out there online. Find out whether or not you actually have an interest in doing it before, you know, wasting your own time with us or us wasting your time, you know.
Okay. Internships come in when, you know, I'm starting to do something. And I have time in between. I have, let's say,
So
that's
I look on that in the case of whether or not the energy that I'm going to be putting into that particular individual, am I going to get something out of it? Because I'm running a business. I have to make sure that whatever I'm putting in, I'm going to get out also at least parity. So if I'm putting somebody who's not even going to bother coming back, maybe they're going off to overseas, maybe they're going off and going to join somewhere else, then what's the guarantee that I'm actually going to get that back at the end of the day? It sounds kind of, you know, maybe a little bit narcissistic, but at the end of the day, I've got to make sure that, because not only am I teaching you, I'm also taking time out of my day. My artists are also going to be busy on shots. They have to basically hold your hand and get you to speed as well. We want to make sure that you are going to retain. We're going to, you know, you're going to be part of the team, you know. So at the end of the day, I would prefer, if anything, graduate, finish what you're doing, then we'll basically discuss and we'll come and bring you in and, you know, train you up, have you on probation for like X amount of time. And then we can basically, you know, you can take a call whether or not you want to stay, you want to go.
Well said.
That's it.